evening, everybody. My name is my name is Zachary Pufahl. I'm faculty in the Center for Arts and Medicine, and this year I had the pleasure of doing a scholar in residence in the Samuel Proctor Oral History program, where I co-designed a course, an internship in using oral history for social justice. And one of our topics that we are working on is a group of students went to the Women's March and Trump inauguration in this past January and documented a number of events that happened at the Women's March and the Trump inauguration. And I thought that this would make an excellent play and a piece of social justice activism that focuses on oral histories. So what you are about to hear this evening is, in fact, true events, and several of the interviews are verbatim in this play that you will hear told by particularly the angels. We hope you enjoy Voices from the March.
Nice pussy hat. Thanks. I bought my ticket as soon as I heard. I'm coming from the West Coast. That's incredible. I'm marching for climate change, for science and truth.
Trump is a sexist and a misogynist. I'm taking a stand for me, my daughter, for my mother, and every other woman in this country.
I'm marching because I think that silence is consent.
I'm going because I believe African Americans and women of color are not represented in this event.
Surrounded by support, I rise, in the hopes that I will find my home in the depths of this endless vortex of voices. Or will I lose myself searching for a sense of belonging? Questions that linger as I stand here imbued in uncertainty and anxiety. I cannot understand why I feel so unwelcome in a country that is supposed to be my home. With each new stamp on my passport, I find myself shackled, yearning for deliverance from a country warped by the insufferable weight of its oppressive past. It does not matter. It does not matter. This freedom has only ever existed as an unreachable white standard. This freedom was never meant for me, preached by a government that never wanted a part of me, and subsequently condemned all of me.
I'm from Oregon. Where are you from?
Originally, I'm from D.C.
I'm coming from California. Anybody else from there?
Me!
Utah, anyone?
Alabama over here.
Mississippi!
Florida!
The night that Donald Trump was elected, I wept and threw up and was devastated. I felt like if there was anything I could do, I had to do it. And I felt like attending this march was a good way to get my ass out of my chair and go do something.
I used to protest in the 60s and 70s, you know. And it was always invigorating, and we had something to say. We were really politically active against the Vietnam War, and it was like our voices were being heard. As we got older, we got pretty silent. Now that Trump has been elected, I think it's time to start protesting again.
It was after Trump got elected that I first began to hear of a protest march supposed to take place after the inauguration. Dr. Ortiz forwarded us an email from Dr. Miranda about a potential collaboration between the Women's Studies Department and the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, and I jumped on it.
Holland caught me in the office, told me about some women's march that was happening in D.C. She was planning a trip to take students up there to conduct interviews with the marchers. I didn't know anything about the march, but I volunteered to be on the team before she had the time to offer me a spot. It was only later that I learned it would be the day after the inauguration, and that we were going there too.
I didn't know anything about the trip or spot until my friend Tico texted me saying, "Hey bitch, we're going to the Women's March to do oral history." And I was like, yes, of course we are. That was all I needed.
I needed to do something. It didn't matter what it was, I just needed to send a message to Trump.
I wasn't going to march. I was going as an oral historian to connect with people. Up until this last election, I thought I knew what my country was. And I guess I just needed to reacquaint myself with it. And though I was afraid, DC seemed like the best place to start.
In preparation, I made 10 different signs with social messages ranging from
Tears of patriarchy.
We are all immigrants.
Unlearn sexism and rape culture.
slay the patriarchy.
Respect existence or expect resistance.
I'm marching because I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and I'm very opposed to what this president stands for. He has no Christian values. And if we don't make our voices known against someone who's blatantly disregarding the poor, disregarding the sojourners, disregarding the sick, that is what Christ was all about, and this man is none of that.
I want the world to see that around the U.S., women and minorities and those who have a different lifestyle are represented, and we're coming together.
The morning of the Women's March, we started by going to a breakfast for Florida women, thrown by, among others, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who I do not support, but it was in the spirit of like Floridian solidarity or something. Anyway, there was a line down the stairs and around the block to get inside for a coffee and bagels and a reception with DWS. My favorite interview that morning, and the first time I cried that day, was with a woman who was covered in pins with the names of her friends in Florida who wanted to come to the march but couldn't make it. It was a really incredible gesture, and the energy that morning was fantastic. But by the time we got into the actual room, there weren't any more bagels or coffee, which was sad for me because my body metabolizes food to create energy.
As soon as I got off the metro stop, it was this flood of pink, and it was so beautiful.
Yeah, I've been to a few marches before, and you always get this feeling of solidarity and comfort, but I've never felt so safe and loved in these places.
I wish everyone could see and feel what I did on that day. I couldn't remember another time in my life where I'd seen so many people occupy such a massive amount of the same space for one event. Swarms of pink just kept pouring in down the streets in every direction we looked. At multiple points throughout the day, we couldn't raise our arms away from our bodies, we were so packed together. And at the same time, I've never felt so safe surrounded by complete strangers. There was this mutual understanding between everyone there that we all belonged in this space. That I belonged in this space.
Eventually, we wiggled our way onto the National Mall, where there was time to breathe and do some interviews. We weren't supposed to be on the National Mall, but there were just so many people at the protest that it became unavoidable.
If I'm being completely honest, I didn't come to DC to march. It isn't that I don't agree with the marchers or that I'm not outraged by the election results. I just didn't think it could amount to anything. I didn't think there was any real change one march could do. It's only now, as I'm standing here, surrounded by a sea of marchers, that I'm realizing this isn't about me.
The reclaiming of our space and the reclaiming of our narrative is a recurring theme in trans organizing. We have to show up and assert that we need to be here and be included.
Fear is one thing that brought me here. I've been very fearful for the next 4 years.
I'm Latina. I think it's important that I not stand on the sidelines, that I show up and show that our community has strong family values.
I hope we can all be beautiful. Like I said, it's a very divided world we live in, and it's not healthy for anyone. We need to come together.
We took a break, hid our press badges, and joined the march proper. We climbed up a freestanding scaffolding and had an incredible view of the hundreds of thousands of people gathered to protest. After a few more hours, the crowd slowly started to move. We all shuffled along until we reached the White House, and then we just continued into downtown DC. At some point, we ended up near the front of the protest, getting honked at by cars, shouting call and response protest chants, and blocking intersections.
People were laughing, cheering, crying, walking in every direction. I encountered a Brazilian whistle and drum group. I started dancing, but not just dancing, I was dancing my heart out. This sense of euphoria took over. I was in this group with strange people that didn't feel very strange. A lady placed a heart-shaped sticker on my cheek, a moment of mutual understanding without speaking. I thanked her. I kept dancing. I started crying. No one told me it would be like this, that in my search for home, I would discover bliss. I can taste the red blood of sacrifice, surrounded by those who are also willing to fight for inclusion against a white, bleached privilege. My identity is made up of a kaleidoscope of colors that are not limited to red, white, and blue. No one told me that in my search for home, I would encounter the unremitting flame of resistance, whose vehement inferno ignites in me a newfound militancy and fuses the divisions engendered by bigoted institutions, those which aim to whitewash the egregious reality of our nation. And now, even in the face of tyranny, I am not alone. I remember being exhausted, but I kept going, surrounded by strangers and family all at once. It was an intense high. I remember I could feel tears rolling down my cheeks, but I didn't feel like I was crying. I didn't feel pain. I felt like we were going to be okay.
I'm Zachary. I'm Zachary from the Samuel Proctor Oral History Center at the University of Florida, and members of the audience, tonight I'm here to interview you about the Women's March on Washington. So to start us off, by a show of hands, did anyone here attend the March on Washington, either in DC or in Gainesville? Incredible. Any of you raise your hands, would you like to share your experience at the Women's March? Not necessary, it's okay if you don't want to.
My experience is perfectly reflected in all of the comments here. It was very powerful moving to, as we drove into to the area where we were going to stay the night before, to walk into the hotel. We were an hour away from DC, and the hotel was full of women. And it was just we knew then, on the way up, that there were a lot of other people who felt the same thing.
Thank you so much for sharing. By a show of hands, how many people here thought that the Women's March on Washington was successful? All right, a lot of people. Out of you who raised your hand, does anyone want to define what that success is, how that success is seen? Okay.
Just by seeing the Virginia election results, how many women were elected into office, that is because people got up and said, it's time to get involved. And something like Emily's list that supports the development of female political candidates has gone from 964 people being involved to almost 20,000. It had a big impact.
Thank you so much. Plenty of people raised their hands. Is there anyone else that wants to share an insight as to why they thought? Ma'am?
What did you want me to share?
Why you thought the march was successful?
Oh, I wasn't going to talk about that. Okay. But I was going to say I went to the march with SPA, and I was the only black woman who went, only black person there, and I spent most of my time alone, so I did a lot of observing. I noticed that most of the black women that I saw there weren't with groups, they were alone. You didn't see a lot of mixed groups, so we still had that same segregation that we have all the time. I was able with Maggie to get into the breakfast. That was excellent. We had lots of food and stuff. We got in right away because, you know what? I said I was a gator to the lady at the door, and she said, go right in. We rode up in the elevator with Senator Bill Nelson, yeah, who I didn't recognize, but he told me who he was. I had a good time, but I was really skeptical going to the march because it's a march ran by middle-class white women, and the first thing they said is no sticks for signs. And to me, a march, you're supposed to hold your sign and look threatening. I mean, that's what a march is all about. So, but it was a really excellent march, and I think it was successful just because of the sheer numbers. And I was glad there was no violence the night before, because in the United States, we do not have social change without property destruction. So it was good there was some property destroyed the night before.
All right, thanks for your insights.
That does not apply to the museum.
I know how you raised your hands to agree with the march was successful. By a show of hands, was there anyone who thought the march could have been conducted a little differently? Anyone who didn't think it was as successful as it could have been? Everybody here tonight thinks the march was as successful as it possibly could have been. That's awesome. That's great to hear.
Even me.
Even you. Awesome. All right. I want to thank you all very much for sharing your insights. I'm going to turn you over now, live to Democracy Now!, where we join the unconquerable Angela Davis.
At a challenging moment in our history, let us remind ourselves that we, the hundreds of thousands, the millions of women, trans people, men, and youth who are here at the Women's March, we represent the powerful forces of change that are determined to prevent the dying cultures of racism, heteropatriarchy from rising again.
I didn't go to the march. I didn't have the experiences that they had when going there. So I want to use my voice as someone from the outside looking in. I want to portray the intersectionality of the march.
Without intersectionality, there's no way to talk about the experiences of people who belong to more than one oppressed group. It's the point where being a woman meets being a person who is queer, a person of color, a person who is disabled. It means fighting multiple systems of oppression at once.
It means recognizing that the women's movement is more than just the struggle for white women's rights.
We recognize that we are a collective agents of history, and that history cannot be deleted like web pages. The freedom struggles of Black people that have shaped the very nature of this country's history cannot be deleted with the swipe of a hand.
What Angela Davis's speech says encompasses pretty much everything that needs to be said about intersectionality, not only in the march, but around the world.
Of course, the march on an organizational level was eventually intentional in being inclusive and intersectional. But it was amazing to me to see how some of the white men in marching failed to recognize other systemic forms of oppression just because they didn't speak to the traditional narrative of the white feminist movement. The prime example I saw of this was a woman wearing an outfit made entirely of bras with messages from friends who couldn't be at the march.
The best way that I felt I could represent my friends from home would be with their undergarments. So I have their bras with me. I'm wearing their support system, and on them they wrote their names and the causes they feel most vigilant about. I have over 20 of them on my person, and I feel them here with me today.
One of the cups had "All Lives Matter" written on it, and that baffles me because it's like your friend traveled all the way to Washington, D.C. to participate in the largest protest of a presidency in American history, and that's the one message you want to send? You want to assert colorblindness and that all lives matter, even though that statement blatantly ignores the issues that the Black Lives Matter movement seeks to address?
We cannot be made to forget that Black lives do matter. This is a country anchored in slavery and colonialism, which means, for better or worse, that the United States has a history of immigration and enslavement, spreading xenophobia, hurling accusations of murder and rape, and building walls will not erase history. No human being is illegal.
I literally come from a family of immigrants. My parents, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. For me, I consider the anti-immigration rhetoric an attack on my culture and my family, even though I was born here. But my family felt different about the situation. They agreed with Trump, saying it was the illegal immigrants that are the problem, not them, because they came here legally. But why should our privilege make us any different when we both had the same drive to be here in the first place, wanting to come to this country to provide better opportunities for our family that the country that we left couldn't provide? Isn't it our moral duty to keep families together and empower all aspiring Americans to fully participate in and contribute to our economy and society? The call to action to love thy neighbor is not limited to the United States because there's a global migration crisis. Migration is a human right.
We dedicate ourselves to collective resistance. Resistance to the attacks on Muslims and on immigrants. Resistance to attacks on disabled people. Resistance to state violence perpetuated by the police and through prison industrial complex. Resistance to institutional gender violence, especially against trans women of color. Over the next months and years, we will be called upon to intensify our demands for social justice, to be more militant in our defense of vulnerable populations. Those who still defend the supremacy of white male heteropatriarchy had better watch out.
I was blown away by the horde of issues represented in the signs of the march. Everything from protesting police brutality to defunding of Planned Parenthood to violence against the trans community to immigrant and refugee and ability discrimination to taxes on tampons and birth control to the Flint water crisis. Even the Virgin Islands, whose residents did not have a vote in the presidential election, were there to represent themselves with their own signs.
Show me what democracy looks like! This is what democracy looks like!
After a while, I couldn't help myself. I started chanting along with them.
No Trump! No
After a year of watching my country play into the hands of fear-mongering, misogynistic rhetoric that made me feel unsafe to visit the Capitol as a woman of color, this march, it was something I had no idea I needed.
No hate! No fear! Immigrants are welcome here!
The America that I loved, the one I believed in, that I thought I'd lost, it was all around me that day. It wasn't going anywhere, not as long as people were still willing to resist, not as long as I was still willing to resist. I slung my microphone cord around the back of my neck and I took off my research correspondence badge, and just like that, I was marching in the largest single-day demonstration in American history. When human rights are under attack, what do we do?
The next 1,459 days of the Trump administration will be 1,459 days of resistance. Resistance on the ground, resistance in the classrooms, resistance on the job, resistance in our art and music. This is just the beginning.
Years of activism. That scares me. I'm passionate about the cause, but I'm barely staying afloat in my daily life. I already feel like I'm overwhelmed and I'm failing. Like my depression and anxiety are defeating me. At the march, I felt strong and empowered, but most of the time I don't know how I'll make it through the next day. What if I can't find the strength to fight?
The strength is in numbers. Having each other's backs when one needs it the most is the only way we can unite in solidarity. The march ignited the spark in the millions and thousands of people that attended. It showed that if they wanted to change something that they felt was an injustice, they needed to get up off their ass and do something about it.
There was a great sign that said something to the effect of, if we don't do anything after this, then this was all just a parade. I think we really need to change that. We need to go back to our homes, gather, and speak out against this administration.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. I think the most important thing about this march is keeping the momentum. I don't think excitement is a good word for it. It was invigorating and exciting to be there, but I remind women all the time that we're also pissed off. And it's great that we've been sitting here and having coffee and organizing things and being friends, but we have to stay pissed off, and we're not going to get anything done.
When I went to the Women's March, I was reaching a crossroads in my life. I had to decide how I was going to spend the next 4 years. I didn't want to sit at home while racists were empowering and emboldening each other, and while marginalized groups were being silenced and their protests misrepresented. And this is why we're here today, to tell our story of how we connected with America in a new way.
In planning this trip, I wondered how our fieldwork could inspire and encourage empathy, specifically for marginalized groups. You can't be an effective ally without sincerely putting yourself in someone else's shoes, listening to the people who make up these marginalized groups, and hearing their concerns.
I think that a lot of personal growth comes from being in challenging spaces. And I'm not just talking about the march. It was only through making myself interact with other people that I really got a sense of where we were and where we are as a country. And it may be really, really ugly, but it wakes you the fuck up.
I'm Aliya. I'm the daughter of immigrants, daughter of veterans. I'm an American. I benefit from the privileges of my birthplace, my light skin, my economic status, and my education. I'm an intersectional feminist, and I'm doing the best that I can.
I'm Matt, and I'm a fighter. I'm a queer, socialist, feminist faggot.
My name is Holland. I'm a daughter and a Leo, and I'm studying to be a mental health counselor.
My name's Xander. I'm from Miami. I'm of Venezuelan descent. I'm white as fuck, and I don't like labels.
I'm Zach. I'm a privileged white guy, and I'm trying to do the right thing.
I'm Elisabeth, a strong and passionate Boricua, queer mujercita with no shame. And
I am not alone.
I am here to tell you that I am worth something.
That my ethnicity has nothing to do with my brain.
That my gender will not be defined by your social constraints.
That my loved ones will not be taken away from me.
That my home is not where, but rather with whom.
We have fought too long and too hard to give up.
It is now, my brothers and sisters, that we must speak out.
It is now that we must come together and fight for our rights.
This war can't be won through placidity alone.
We must rise above and realize that the key to victory lies in unity.
We must actively seek to challenge one another.
To join forces and arm ourselves with knowledge. We must become their senators, their governors,
their presidents.
Thank you. This play has been written by the students, and I think they have poured their hearts into it, and the results are really exceptional. Yeah. To ask some questions, if you'd like to ask some questions of the company, if there are any of their experiences or our process of creating this, or just a couple of minutes if anyone would like to comment or question.
Do you have plans to further your research or collect more stories? Because we were just at the Women's March convention, and there was still a lot of excitement, and this is just really cool.
You want to answer that one? Yeah.
So we'll be performing like the full play at the Social Justice Summit in late January. But by then we've also put together a zine. It's been kind of like a new way we've done projects recently, and it really allows us to do public humanities. And so, for example, the last zine that we worked on featured for the Queer History Project, and it featured poems and art from queer people. And so we kind of hope to replicate that for the Women's March and do kind of commemorate the 1-year anniversary of the Women's March. So look out on our social media and for the call for proposals.
Also, the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program is making the National Repository for Women's March and tributes we're going to be going to the National Women's Studies Association conference in Baltimore next week, and we're going to be presenting over there. Angela Davis is actually keynote speaking, so that's going to be really exciting. We're trying to do more work as far as getting more interviews about social activism. When Richard Spencer thing was happening, we had a team out there interviewing protesters and organizers of the event, and that is actually becoming a part of a larger course that is going to be about Black and Latinx history that left, which we're giving next in the spring. So that is something that UF is offering now.
Yeah, so this excerpt that you did see tonight is part of a larger work that we are developing, a full-length play that we are planning to perform on January 26th as part of the University of Florida Social Justice Summit. And if you do want some more information about that, or I can email you about that event, I will leave this on a music stand here after we leave. Any other comments before we let you off into your evenings? Oh, one back there. Step away from the speaker.
I just want to say thank you so much for this. You guys encourage us even more to continue this fight.
Thank you so much, and a special thanks to the Harn for having us, and have a great evening.